It's finals week and 3 teams remain. The Renegades did everything they could to control their own destiny.
He brings up the win. Haley Matthews wins it for the Renegades.
The Heat secured second place and the right to host the Challenger.
Gets that away and down to the boundary, and with that, the Heat captain locks away second spot.
And the Thunder Nation, led by Litchfield, are alive and swinging.
Picks it up to Phoebe Litchfield. And that is a superb 6.
We're one step closer to crowning the champions of WBBL 10. This is The Surge. Yes, 3 teams left, 2 games left in this year's WBBL for 2024. Adam White with you for another edition of The Surge, and I'm joined in studio by Kirby Short. Kirby, welcome.
Thank you, Whitey. Good to be here again.
2 games left. We've got there, nearly.
Yes, then there were 3, and it's tight. It's been tight the whole way through, so looking forward to these last couple of finals matches.
Since we last spoke, it kind of turned on its head with the Renegades coming from where they were to go and almost leapfrog everybody to get through to the final, which is sort of emblematic of the season, that just when you think something's going to happen, something else happens.
Yeah, it was the order, wasn't it? It was right up until that final match, didn't really settle on who was going to finish where. So there was that. There's the fact that you sort of almost felt like the top 3, regardless of the order they landed in, were pretty clear from sort of about halfway. And then it was who was going to scrape into that 4th spot, and the Hurricanes got it done against the Scorchers, but couldn't quite get it done against the Thunder.
Now, we've got a very special guest, and we're actually throwing the rundown out. We're doing it totally differently because we've got an absolute superstar of the women's game, and she is captain of the Melbourne Renegades, Sophie Molineux, in the studio with us. Sophie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited.
The captain of the Melbourne Renegades into a grand final. How does that sound?
Yeah, it still probably hasn't quite sunk in. It's been a few days too, but from where we were last year to be able to turn it around like this, it's been a really enjoyable week so far. Haven't really known how to play it because we've never really had to wait a week for a final, but no, it's very cool.
We'll talk about the Renegades shortly, but just from an overall point of view, I'm interested. You're like a panel member as well as the captain of the Renegades today. Just how the season's unfolded now, because there's changes this year compared to last year, less games, sort of, different final series than what we've had in previous years. How do you, as a player, how do you think it has gone through the course of this year?
Yeah, as Kirb said, it's been really tight throughout the whole season. Only 10 games sort of puts more of an emphasis on each game, and I think now the standard and the quality of every team has just gone through the roof, which makes it, it's really fine margins between winning and losing. From being 0 and 2 at the start, we were making sure that we didn't get too low on confidence, just because we knew that there was such a fine margin between being 2 and 0. It's made every game really important, which has been fun to play.
Now, you've been flying around all over the country. You don't even know what day it is, Kirby, but from your point of view, that I'm not going to call it a compressed schedule because the games are still every night pretty much like they have been, but less games, more emphasis on each match. Do you think it's made for a better competition?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you stand outside of it at the back end of the season and think, well, there are less games, but you hear lots of players talking about how they still feel like it's been back the suitcase, travel, play. So I think that there's a bit of falseness in that. I think the compressed nature of the schedule just means that, like you say, so if you just can't get too far behind in terms of worrying about results, and I think it's those close games, I think it just means it changes your margins, doesn't it, in the sense that you go, okay, well, if we've lost 2, we actually can't afford to lose any more, but equally, if we ride the low of losing some of those games, then you actually get too far behind to catch up. So it's almost this vicious cycle where being as even as you can for as long as you can allows you to continue to compete. And I can't say enough about the reduction to 10 games. I think the domestic cricket brain in my head went, how's this going to be? Because we've produced winning Australian teams for so long because we have this quality of competition where we get exposure for our domestic players to play against the best in the world. But equally, we can't produce the best in the world if we don't attract the best in the world to this competition. And the only way we can do that is to reduce the length of the competition. So I was honestly dubious heading into it, more so from the lens of how do we keep our incredible pathway rolling in Australian cricket. and have been really pleasantly surprised by how great that 10-game season has been, and across the board how positively that's been spoken about. And once again, it's our domestic players that we're unearthing still in this competition. We're not exclusively talking about the internationals, which I think means we're still serving our purpose.
What about from a playing point of view? You're nodding, so you're happy with how it sort of stands at the moment, how it sits at the moment?
Yeah, I was with Kirbs. I think firstly it was that thought of we're pulling games away from our domestic girls. But then even just having that spring carnival before the Big Bash, you could see like we were away in Dubai during that carnival and didn't see a lot of it, but in rounds 1, 2 and 3 of the WBBL, all these names, all these young girls just stood out, and you could tell they'd played a few games in those colours, come out, and they just had this level of fearlessness that was incredible. It was like Bray in the first game against us, she hit us over cover 4 off the last ball and won in the game. Like it was, you could just tell that competition served its purpose, and the young girls come in and attack the whole Big Bash probably differently to previous years.
So you're qualified better than almost anyone to talk about now the leagues we have around the world. Does it still feel that the WBBL is number one? You'd probably be a little bit biased being Australian, but to play the 100, to play in India, does it still feel that the Australians, we have the best one?
Yeah, I think they're all very different. From a standard quality point of view, I do still think that the WBBL is the best one. You go to England and there's massive crowds over there. It's aligned with the men's, so that's different. And then the IPL, it's just another world over there. They're also playing on grounds with 35-metre boundaries, and the scores are through the roof. So it's really hard to compare, and each tournament's quite unique to each other. And but yeah, if the Big Bash is still attracting the best players in the world, and our domestic talent and young girls are coming in and have done so well this season, I think it's going to stay at the top there for a very long time.
And that's a good thing, that the competitions are different. They don't necessarily have to be better than the other. That as a professional cricketer, if you look through your schedule and look at the games that you're going to play domestically as opposed to internationally, I would imagine that's a good thing, that you've got different experiences for players as well as for fans.
Absolutely. There's always cricket on now, and having each competition being so different, it probably keeps everyone fresh. And you just see, like in the T20 game, everything's so fine margin now. Just being able to experience different teams and travelling in different countries and that, it's just it's such a good space for the women's game at the moment.
What do you think, Kirby? You still think the WBBL is number one?
I can't speak with the same authority that Soph can about the different competitions in the world. I think, though, there are now 3 clear windows for those 3 competitions. So I think we are being prioritised as one of the top 3, and I think it's on us also to continue to innovate and stay ahead of that. I think we had a product that no one else had, and then other places, and obviously it's logical that it's England and India that are the 2 that kind of then chase what that product looks like. I really respect that England have done it a little bit differently with the 100 as well. To Soph's point, it looks different. They've always been male and female teams together. I think there's an interesting period in Australian cricket for us to navigate. We initially were together because we almost needed to hang the women's games off the men's games to attract fans to the game. Then there was this transition to we've earned the right to be separate. And now we've seen a model in the UK where together is actually really beneficial as well. So there's some interesting things floating around too in that space in terms of what our next 5 to 10 years looks like, because we want to learn from others as well as innovate for ourselves and stay ahead. So I think if you take the players' perspective, you hear internationals, you hear domestic players talking about how much they enjoy playing in this competition, and they vote with their feet, don't they? It's about their time is so precious. Their schedules as international cricketers are simply so full. If they're showing up, it means that they think it's worthy of showing up for. And I think that's as good a vote of confidence as you can get.
So, Sophie, from your point of view, would you like it to be like it is in England, where the men and women are playing together? Clearly, it's not that way at the moment. Is that something you could see happening as a celebration of cricket as opposed to it being men or women, or do you like the separation?
That's a good question. I'll probably to and fro a little bit with that. Just experiencing the first 3 or 4 years in the Big Bash where we were alongside the men, and as Kirb said, it was pretty much just playing off the back of them just to gain a bit of momentum. And now that we've been standalone for a while, and it's we've obviously found our feet in that space as well. But to go over and experience that English summer and having the big crowds that hung around for a men's game at the start and then women's game afterwards, like there's differences there.
Yeah.
There's definitely ways. There's different ways of doing it. It's just I don't know. It just depends on. I think the big thing for us is it's just be so great to see more people at the grounds, and it is quite an early tournament in the cricket summer, and people are just getting over their footy hangovers, but and the spring racing carnival. But I think where it is now, it's working. But you always want to look forward and see if there's any other opportunity there that can grow the game, so there's more eyes, there's more young boys and girls watching.
I mean, as a broadcaster, but also as a father of 3 children that love their cricket, I'm trying to think about what I think would work best, and I hadn't really thought about it too much until having this discussion. And I think it's healthy that we don't know a categoric answer. I think that shows how far the women's game has come. In my house, when the cricket's on, it's the cricket's on. It's not the men's cricket's on or the women's cricket's on. It's cricket. And I think that's an advancement, I think, in the last 10 to 15 years that my children see it that way. They love cricket, so they'll watch it. So I wonder whether if there was almost like if we think of it from an Australian Open point of view, you go to the tennis. You don't go to watch the men's tennis, or you don't go to watch the women's tennis. You go to watch the tennis, and you'll walk around on different courts and just take in the sport. And I wonder whether if they were, not all games have to be women and men on the same day, but if there was a collection of that, you might have a carnival of cricket and it might work quite well. I don't know. Not sure. Don't know the answer to it, to be honest. But
solving the problems of the world here.
Yeah, that's right. We're getting a bit too deep and meaningful, really. Before we get on to the Renegades discussion, because obviously Sophie is here as captain of the Renegades, as you said, Kirby, there are 3 teams left. Give us a little bit of a feeling, particularly for the 2 teams that are going to play the Renegades potentially on the weekend. Only one can do it, obviously, but with the Heat and the Thunder left, where are we feeling the strength is, the best team to take on the Renegades?
I don't know about the best team to take on the Renegades. Soph will probably have a strong opinion about that. That one's not for me, but in terms of who I think will play the Renegades, I think it will be the Heat. They've had a chance to be at home. Their last couple of big wins have been at Allan Border Field. I think ultimately they've been a bit too consistent and have too much depth compared to the Thunder. That doesn't mean the Thunder aren't dangerous, and that's not me speaking with my teal cap on either. I actually think the Thunder were pretty lucky to slide through last night in that game against the Hurricanes. I think that misstumping they will rue for a very long time because they've done such a wonderful job to get to a total that they could defend, knowing the bowling strength that sits with the Thunder. So I think that's a good result for them in the sense that Chamari Atapatu, she was excellent and she'd really struggled with the bat prior to that. She's been outstanding with the ball this season but struggled a little bit with the bat. So an all-round performance from her will really buoy the Thunder. I think the other really critical part is that Phoebe Litchfield, she's had, I think it was 5 30-plus innings, but not a match-winning performance. And last night it was a match-winning performance from her. She'd resisted the ramp the entire evening and she couldn't help herself at the last hurdle, but essentially called that 50 not out and she's won that game for her team. So they've got some important people doing good things at the right time. I'm just not sure about the depth factor when you compare those 2 sides. I think there's a little bit too much firepower all the way through the Heat's lineup. I think the Thunder really rely on economical bowling, particularly during their power play, and almost try and shut teams down in that phase of the game. And I think the matchup to watch that will be fascinating will be the Grace Harris-Sam Bates battle at the top, because the Thunder rely on that really tight power play. The Heat rely on Grace Harris as their leading run scorer, particularly this season, up the top. And if she bats deep, they tend to then give permission down their batting lineup. So I'm looking forward to seeing whichever order that happens, but when that happens, Bates v Grace Harris will be epic. So there's some interesting things to occur in that game.
So home teams, you'd want to think they would feel they have an advantage, but as you said, Heat plays so well up at Allan Border Field. Why is it? Why have they got a game that suits that venue?
I think they're a power hitting side, aren't they? And I think they back themselves historically they've been probably a better batting team than bowling team, and the conditions at Allan Border Field are pretty conducive to that. I think it's may even be less so about Allan Border Field for the Heat and more so about the transition for the Thunder from Drummoyne to Allan Border Field. I think that will actually be a bigger factor necessarily than just that pure we're playing on our home deck type of situation, because I think Drummoyne has really lent itself to the success of the likes of Bates, a Peschel, a Darlington. They've been outstanding with that sort of skiddy three-quarter seam, variable bounce, a little bit of nip off the surface, whereas you don't necessarily get that from Allan Border Field. Then, though, enter Shabnam Ishmael, and I cannot wait to see her open the bowling there as well. I think that will be it'll be such a great battle, as I said, in the power play. So I think it's one of those things too. It's not on a stat sheet, Allan Border Field for the Heat. I think they're just confident playing there. They know the conditions. They're comfortable in the venue. They typically will get really great crowds there as well. They're so well supported. And they're into their 7th final series in a row. So they've been here, they've done that, and they feel really good about that consistency.
It's the Kirby shot legacy. They just know they know how to get through to the finals, the Brisbane Heat. So from your point of view, watching this essentially a preliminary final, do you sit on the couch and get the popcorn out and watch it? Or are you someone that goes, I can't get too emotionally invested in the game, I'll take out the highlights and work with the coaches to dig out what we need to dig out ahead of Sunday?
I've never been in this position before. Yeah. I've never had to sit back and wait to see who we're playing. Normally we're finished up by now. But we're going to have a few girls around for dinner tomorrow night. We'll watch it all, I think. We might as well make the most of what's been a pretty special week. So, we'll watch it pretty closely.
Do you watch it like with the notepad out or your phone out taking notes, or do you just watch it? I mean, because as the captain, you're watching the game from a strategic point of view, tactically. Are you taking notes as you go and sort of taking it all in? How do you watch a game?
I've watched a lot of cricket over the last few years, and I think it's probably just an instinctive mental thing that you just take in, and then when you need to write it down, I'll probably do that just before the game and just to get some clear thoughts in my head. But I don't know. It's sort of one of those things that you watch the game, take in what you can, and maybe subconsciously you're taking in little things as well.
I don't want you to I don't want to put you under the bus here, but is there a team that you're thinking you're more likely to play at this point, or you're open-minded? How do you watch things? Because I mean, it is a Thursday and the final is on Sunday, so I'm sure you're starting to get in that headspace of playing and starting to sort of think about the potential matchups.
Yeah, I think Brisbane Heat in Brisbane incredibly hard to beat. But then on the other side of that, Thunder have got 2 or 3 players that are just genuine world-class, top players in the world, really. And to see Phoebe play that innings last night, that just showed so much maturity for a 21-year-old, and she really led from the front there. It was a bit of a captain's knock. So it just takes, although it is a team game and Brisbane Heat have a lot of depth, sometimes in T20 cricket I've seen games being won off 1 or 2 players' bats, and which just makes it so intriguing.
All right, you're listening to The Surge. Don't forget, tickets for the final at the MCG. The MCG are still available now, so go to bigbash.com.au to secure your ticket at the final on Sunday. Kirby, it's a chance now to talk to Sophie about the Renegades and about Sophie as well. So I'm going to ask the first question, then Kirby can go for it. You were talking before about the fact you lost the first 2 games, close losses, but off the back of what had happened in previous seasons. How hard was it not to panic or not to worry about, it's going to be another one of those seasons at that point when you were playing good cricket but not getting the wins?
Yeah, we lost our first game to Sydney Sixers at Adelaide Oval. We thought after that, we were pretty flat actually, because we thought we could have won that. Although Elise Perry put on an absolute masterclass. It's probably the best I've ever seen anyone hit a ball. So, we were a bit disappointed about that. And then we got to Brisbane straight after that and got thumped. And we just didn't play anywhere near our best. But there was little signs there that we sort of held on to. And I think Georgia Wareham and I actually sat down after that game in the rooms and said it just feels different this year. I think previously if we had dropped a couple of games at the start, we'd be like, here we go again. let's try and get a high draft pick next year and try again. But this year it just felt different, I think, with the personnel that we were able to get into. We had some really fresh faces in there, and you just feel like there was no battle scars in there. And with the assistance of someone like Helmo, who's always up and about, I think that probably really kicked into gear and served its purpose up when we were 0-2, and we had a weekend in Melbourne after that, and we had 2 games back to back, and we just thought like we might as well start now, and we did. So it was, I think the big thing that I think we all learnt in that first couple of games was you just can't get too emotional. You can't buy into it too much, and as you said, Curbs, you just got to stay as level as possible, because between 10 games in 3 weeks, there's fatigue in that. You're travelling, so if you can try and keep your emotions and you can stay on top of all that, they're the things you can control in a tournament that you can't control a lot.
There's so much gold in what you've just said, so if I'm not quite sure which tangent to take, my brain's pinging. Let's go back before the season even starts, because you talked about personnel, and for me there's 2 parts to that: who you chose to pick and why, and the conversations between you and Helmo in terms of the gaps, because you've got this great core at the Renegades of talented cricketers and wonderful human beings that haven't quite converted. So what were the gaps that you saw that you needed to fill? And then now looking back on the season that was, geez, you've had some interesting people play different roles for you across the season. So do with those 2 what you will.
I don't really know where to start. Maybe picking up Deandra Dotton with our first draft pick.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a curveball, and I suppose it was a risk just because Deandra hadn't played a whole lot of cricket in the last 2 or 3 years. But I think we knew deep down that we knew what she was going to bring. And she's been one of the best things that we've picked up, and she's contributed so much to the group on the field, but more so off the field.
Before you move off Deandra, she's a really interesting one, and I would love you to maybe debunk some of the misconceptions that I think would exist in cricket pertaining to her. I think if you haven't played in a team with her, you probably have a perception of her that isn't entirely accurate. So for those that haven't had that experience, how would you describe her in a team environment?
She's a big softie. My God, she can hit a ball a long way, and she can, if she wants to, she can bowl 125, I reckon, for sure. But incredibly skillful, but just a really lovely person. She's quite softly spoken. She was quite shy at the start until her mate Hayley Matthews come in from her little Caribbean holiday. She missed the first couple of games, Hales, but. Really softly spoken, but at the same time, she's a lovely person and a great teammate.
And other recruits then? So D-Dot's the big one that seemed like a bit of a roughie in the scheme of things. And what other gaps had Helmo sort of identified that he sought your advice on?
Probably looking over the last couple of years, we were a little bit skinny on runs. Our game plan was last year was to scrape with the bat and win our games with the ball. And just with the way T20 cricket's going, you can't win tournaments like that. So I think we did work out that we needed to really lift in the batting part of it, and it helped at the start there. We signed Tay Volemic, thinking that we're going to get 4 overs out of her. Millie Ellingworth come across, so that covered the bowling. So we were able to go hard at international batters, and we retained Hayley, and then got Alice Capsey to top that up. But on the back of that, we sort of sat down and worked out. We've got a core group of domestic girls here, your Courtney Webbs, Georgia Warehams, Em Debro, Nicole Fulton, girls that are probably hitting that age now where they've got a bit of experience under their belt. We're not young anymore. It's time for us to be able to win games off our own bats, not just buy that in with internationals. So that was probably a big conversation too, and you just top that up with some internationals. And T20 is a fickle game. Like it could have gone wrong. It definitely could have gone wrong, but looking back now, it's been pretty good.
And let's talk about some of those roles, because a number of the games that you've won have been a consequence of your domestic players. Hayley and Courtney at the top are the most productive opening partnership in the competition, and that's a different role that Webby's been playing. How did you land on that?
I think the Spring Challenge did that. There was a few auditions there. There was 5 or 6 girls that opened the batting, and I think Webby just put her hand up. She said, "Just I want to crack at it," and Halmo loves that stuff. He was all on board, and I think Wade Seckham come in, and he's our batting coach, and it was just really clear from all the coaches that we just want girls to be brave and attack the game and back their own ability, and there'll be no consequences no matter what happens. And yeah, the coaches have been really strong with that and stuck by that. And I think you just see someone like Webby and some of the innings she's played, some of the shots she's played through cover on the up, slapping it, like it's been so good to watch. And we've always known she's got that. She had a year about 3 or 4 years ago where she scored a heap of runs. We hadn't sort of found that for the last couple of years. I think we were throwing her around the order to try and work out where that was. And credit to her. She put her hand up and she's taken that opportunity with both hands, and her and Hayley have been great.
Is that a hard adjustment? And it's just probably for both of you, that whole thing about getting rid of that fear of failure, because cricket is about coping with failure largely. But in T20 cricket, it seems that's the modern way now. Being brave is not being reckless, and that if you get out but you're doing it for the team, that's okay. Is it hard to adjust, or is it you've sort of acclimatised to that change of philosophy now as a cricketer? Yeah,
it's a really fine line, being fearless and reckless, and that gets spoken about a lot. The difference could be an inch if you hit the ball over cover for 4, it looks amazing. If you hit the ball out of the middle of the bat but it goes into a girl that's 6'2", her hands, it's reckless. It's just there's such fine line. But I think what I'm probably learning, and Halmo and Wade have been really big on this year. It's not about it can't be all about outcomes. I think those first couple of games when we lost those games, we still took away a lot of things in terms of how we were playing and little moments that we saw some change in it from maybe the year before. There was moments we were winning when we would traditionally lose, or we'd go back into our shell. I think it's just taking away outcomes and being focused on how you're going to do things and what suits each player more so. Everyone's got different strengths. It's just being able to back each other in on that.
Because I reckon from your point of view, almost, and I'm not being ageist here, but being that little bit older, that change of philosophy, because you've got the decision-making process and then you've got the execution, which is part of the process versus outcome. I'm interested in your view on how the game's changed and whether that you struggle with that, Kirby.
Yeah, as you asked the question in Soph Talks, I think of it in 2 ways. I think about myself as a batter and how risk averse I was, and I was probably better at enabling players to be their best self and take the game on where that was more natural and comfortable for them. So I think, and that was a question I'll come back to for Soph about the role that you and Helmo play in doing that for players in your squad, because we've also seen someone like Nick Fulton, almost that belief that you were talking about with Webby sort of penetrates the change room, and we've seen Nick Fulton almost ride the wave of belief that the Renegades have and talk about playing shots you've never seen someone play before. She's been unbelievable too and won your games off her own bat. So we'll come back to that. But I think to your question, Whitey, I think there is absolutely a shift, and it's so astute trying to call out that difference between reckless and fearless. And I think there are some players who almost use the fearless but actually are reckless versus the ones that strike the appropriate balance.
Because it can be easy to use it as an excuse.
Absolutely. This is the way that I play, and this is what you'll get from me no matter what. Yeah. And in some ways that's good, because as a captain and a coach, you know that that's what you'll get, and it might be bang a lot more, or bust a lot more than it's bang, but you accept that that's the way that they play. But if you have a whole list that does that, that's unsustainable. So I think you do need, maybe not as risk averse as I was with the bat in hand, but you certainly need a level of that to go, well, what's the situation? What does that need from me right now? Knowing that you can have a couple of players that will teeter with that reckless line, because that may well come off in some games when you need it to as well. But I think if you looked across a list of 11 and you think about how the game has changed, more players will teeter with the line of being more fearless and closer to reckless than they are conservative now in the T20 game. And you don't score enough runs, and take enough wickets if you're not prepared to take the game on in that way.
I want to ask you, Sophie, about culture and what the Renegades culture is. Culture, it's a bit of a sort of a buzzword, maybe an overused word, but describing it at the Renegades, you as captain, say Simon as coach, and some of your big name players, what would be the Renegades culture?
It's a good question. I think we've probably been known over the years that we enjoy ourselves, the Renegades, and
Renegades, meant to.
Yeah. I think Helmo, what he brings to a team, it's pretty hard to articulate. His energy is it's contagious. He brings chaos to a group, but it's actually controlled chaos, and I think that actually brings out a lot of people's ability to withstand pressure. And he just backs people in. It always helps when you win games and everything. But I think even at the start of the season when we dropped the first couple, you could see that it was a bit different this year because everyone did just stay level and we did still enjoy each other's company and sort of valued each other's being in each other's space. So I think it's in a tournament like this, it can be pretty brutal in terms of the demand on players having 10 games in 3 or 4 weeks with travel. But if you work out ways to be able to really enjoy it when you're there with each other off the field, that comes on to the field. And you could really feel that this season. And it's not always, you always search for it. In any team you're in, you always search for that feeling when you're out in the middle. It's just good fun. There's a lot of smiles on the faces, a lot of laughing. We might be under pressure, but there's still, girls are still smiling. And there's that feeling of just genuinely wanting each other to do well, which sometimes you don't get in teams, and you can't put a finger on why. But right now we're sort of running with that, and it's been quite enjoyable.
So Kirby and I spoke about the clip that we all watched of Simon Helmet in the rooms with you after a particular game, and you could tell just in his voice that this belief came over him, and he talked about how he could look in the eyes of all the players and you could see the belief, and it gave him this great optimism of what was possible. Can you take us into that particular discussion and whether you felt that, whether you sensed it, whether you'd spoken about it before Simon had spoke? Because it was quite powerful to actually watch that. Yeah.
Helmo, when he speaks, he has everyone in the room just hanging off their chair, just waiting for his next words. He's got this amazing ability to come up with the right words at the right time, and I think because he cares so much for each individual in that room, and he does so much for that club. He speaks with real emotion. And so when he spoke that afternoon, I think it was maybe a win against the Strikers, that second win of that weekend to get us 2-2. It was really powerful. I felt like we could all run through a brick wall after that. That's how he made us all feel. But yeah, it was just a really well timed speech that he made. He tends to do that really well.
I think when you talk about culture, you can't not talk about connection. And I think something that you are so widely regarded for doing really well, whether you speak to a Deandra Dotton who's an international, you speak to Georgia Presswedge, who you share a Victorian change room with as well as a Renegades change room with, and they will all speak about your capacity to switch on and switch off and connect with them as individuals. To build a culture, you have to feel connected. And if Helmo is the master of the words at the right time, what do your actions look like as a leader that allows you to build such great connections in your team?
It's probably things that I don't even think about, to be honest. It's I think at the end of the day, like the biggest thing for me as a leader, it comes down to I just care. I just care about the players that are in those rooms. I care about that franchise, and I suppose that's probably the biggest thing that I come back to is how people are going, if they're okay, if they feel comfortable and ready to perform. And sometimes it's probably I care too much. That's
another fine line, isn't it?
It is. But I'm very lucky. Like there's some incredible leaders in that change room as well, and senior players. You've got Hayley Matthews, who's a World Cup captain, and you've got Georgia Wareham, who's coming into her own in that space in the Renegades colours, and even players like Nikki Fulton and Georgia Presswidge, like they just it's so natural in terms of getting a group together. So it's players like that just do those things without even thinking, and when it all comes together, it's every little bit counts. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky in that front.
I'm interested too in that we were talking a lot about fine lines today. The balance in cricket, there's a level of selfishness required to ensure that you perform. And then as a leader, it's such a selfless job. How do you, because your performances, Soph, this season have been elite as well, and we haven't even touched on the quality of you with ball in hand and bat and the match-winning performances that you've had as skipper of this team. How do you find the balance, and maybe this is something Phoebe's learning about her game too, between being selfish enough to be ready to perform and win games for your team and selfless enough to understand where every player in your change room is at?
Yeah, I think I'm probably 3 or 4 years into it now, captaining at Renegades, but I reflect and look back on maybe the first couple of years. I certainly didn't have that balance right, and I think my personality is to probably go over the top in terms of making sure everyone's okay. And that I probably slipped down a bit of a slide there, and my game and my health probably went with that. And I just thought that's what you need to do to be captain. You need to make sure everyone is A-OK every day, sort of thing. I used to have I can't believe I'm saying this, but I used to have a checklist of all our players, and I'd go down it like every night and just like either be a tick or a cross to like if I needed to catch up with them or if they're okay or not. Like it was just got to a point there. It was probably not sustainable. But I wouldn't have changed any of that. Like it was just a learning curve for me. And probably the expense of that was my performances, and I wasn't able to stay out on the park. But I think fast forward a couple of years, I think maybe I am finding that balance a little bit more in terms of being a leader, but also it's just as important to be able to perform and lead with actions out in the ground and to be out on the ground. That's probably a big thing as well, and not sitting in the stands.
I want to ask you about that with the knee reconstruction that you had. Unfortunately, that means a lot of time on the couch and a lot of time rehabilitating your knee, but also I'm sure plenty of self-reflection time. What did you learn, or what did you think during that time that's helped you come back, I would argue, a better cricketer now than you've potentially ever been?
There's a lot of sitting on the couch. There's a lot of doing nothing. It's sort of hard to list things that you've learnt in those couple of years where I was out. I think overall I've probably come out of it maybe a little bit more well-rounded in terms of just having the perspective of life. I think maybe when I was really lucky and sort of come out of school and straight into programs and straight into touring with Australia, and absolutely loved it. Like got to win a couple of World Cups really early, and I probably took that for granted, to be honest. Like I just thought it would play out like that for the rest of my career, and I suppose when it stops, you have to stop with it and just take a bit of time. And I had some amazing support through that time as well. And it was just, in a weird way, it was just really nice to be able to stay in the one spot for a while and reconnect with family and friends that I hadn't done for a few years there, where I suppose life got away from you a little bit and you tour, and probably makes me look at the game a little bit differently now.
Did you think at any point that you weren't going to, or that you were worried you wouldn't get back to your absolute best because of what you'd gone through? And as you said, everything had happened not easily, because nothing happens easily as a professional athlete, but you had so much success individually and from a team point of view that, I'm not sure I can get back to those heights again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest thing when you're out of the game for 2 years, especially the game it is now. It's just getting better and better all the time. There was definitely doubts there that if I'd come back, I was going to be standing still and not, have the same success and team success that I had before that. But yeah, as I said before, there was just so many people in my corner through that time that continuously reminded me that that stuff will just come. It'll be okay. Just focus on now sort of thing, and just focus on your next leg extension or your next squat or yeah, just little things like that. But yeah, definitely it crossed my mind.
What makes Soph such a good player, Kirby? Because we've talked a lot about leadership, but just purely and simply from a playing point of view, this is going to embarrass the hell out of Sophie. But what makes her so good?
I think you mentioned not worrying about outcomes and thinking about process. And when I think about someone like Soph, it's the process that she clearly goes through in the background. Talk about feedback from her team. She's the first there and the last to leave, partially because she's trying to be present with her team. The other massive part of that is the little things that she's prepared to do to find where is the 1% where I can be a little bit better. And that reflection of sitting and being injured and having time to consider, well, how important is this to me and what sacrifices am I prepared to make? And I think every time you see Soph come back into an Australian summer, having either been overseas playing for Australia, playing at other franchise competitions, there's something that she's doing a little bit better or a little bit differently. And I think if you look at players in any sport that are world class, but particularly cricket, because it's such mentally a challenging game, you have to be prepared to park the fact that you know that you'll have failure and just worry about what is the 1% difference that I can find about my own game that I can control, with the view that I know how that will contribute to me getting better. And Sophie Molineux is a player and a human that likes to find the 1%. The power hitting game that we've seen from her this season, it feels weird talking about someone who's sitting next to you.
It's so weird. I can stop now, Kev.
It was meant to be embarrassing for Sophie, not for you.
No, I feel discomfort. I feel her discomfort through my left ear. But I think you look at, we know her craft with the ball. I think she's outstanding in that sense. There's variation, there's consistency. I think she's also a very thoughtful cricketer, which means that she reads a circumstance and knows what skills she needs to draw on. I think the batting, and when you look at that Australian side, you have to be a multifaceted contributor. Otherwise, you simply don't have a spot in the 11. So again, what's the 1%? Georgia Wareham is another one that you work really hard alongside in the same way. The power hitting game, we've seen that the innings against the Strikers that was won on the last ball, it's some unbelievable hitting. There was an innings against the Thunder to get your team through to the final. And I think it's that you just keep seeing new and different, accessing different parts of the ground, hitting the ball harder to a different part of the ground, refining a skill set with her bowling, and all whilst contributing as a leader in her state, in her franchise. And it probably wouldn't be surprising if that translates elsewhere as well down the track.
And do you think you're a better batter or a better bowler?
I love batting, but probably, over the last few years, it's probably been the stuff with the ball that's got me in teams and everything. But I really enjoy the challenge of batting. I think that's mentally probably more stimulating for me. But
Yeah, because the reason I asked the question is I can't think of too many players around the country, man or woman, male or female, that is more closer to 50-50 as a batter and a bowler in a team than you are. And that's why I asked the question is, what do you think you're better at? Because I don't know whether I could definitively give an answer on that one. What do you think, Kirby?
Yeah, it's actually tough. And I think if you're having trouble answering it, then maybe that's a good problem to have.
It is. And it's a credit to Sophie that she is so good at both batting or bowling. Because, I mean, as an all-rounder, it's great to be able to contribute with both. But you can win a game either with a bat or with the ball, which is a credit to you because there's not too many that can do that.
And maybe that's, we talk about evolutions in people's games. I think it's all about opportunity too, isn't it? You find yourself in a Renegades lineup, for example, where you genuinely can contribute with bat and ball. Sometimes for Australia, it's, hey, here are your 2 overs in a T20 game and you have to make the most of that. And I think that's the art form of being a contributor and continuing to make yourself relevant no matter what team you're playing in. And if you happen to have 2 or 3 skill sets that mean that you're good enough to be in those teams, it will then just be about the moment in the game that presents and how you think you can best contribute to it.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to take the pressure off Sophie a little bit. She's been under the spotlight, but we'll come back and talk about a few other issues in the game at the moment, and also focusing on Sunday at the MCG. This is The Surge.
I just find it's like the place of opportunity, right? I got to go when I was 16 and probably wouldn't have had to go any other team that I could have probably signed for. So, and it's definitely shaped the cricketer I am.
So there was Phoebe Litchfield there announcing a new 3-year contract to remain at the Thunder. And no real surprises there, but they're really getting their ducks in a row, the Thunder, aren't they, Kirby?
Yeah, it's indicative of how they've approached it long term, you would say. I think of Alex Blackwell, I think of Rachel Haynes, even though she wears a pink shirt these days, but very much a lime green heart inside that chest. And I think Phoebe Litchfield's almost the next generation version of that for that club. So Trent Copeland, he's been so considered with what those signings are, who they want to keep together, and we've seen that keeping that core group of players. Talk about the affection that the Renegades have for one another. You certainly see that in that Thunder group as well. It's sort of derived from that Breakers environment in New South Wales and really does feed into that Thunder environment. So to have Phoebe for 3 more years, Hannah Darlington for 3 more years, Annika Learoyd for a couple more, Sam Bates, she's in career best form at the moment as well, and she signed a couple more years. So they're really building that core group that they'd like to hang on to.
Sophie's continuing with us on The Surge. I'm interested from a Phoebe Litchfield point of view, coming onto the scene as such a young player, sort of took the world by storm when she first started, but she keeps lifting the bar on her own performances, both as a player but also as a leader for someone so young. It is quite astounding considering the pressure that she's under at such a young age to be the new superstar of the game.
Yeah, and she handles it so incredibly well, and that's probably why she's been able to get better. She burst onto the scene 3 or 4 years ago and actually hasn't taken a step back.
No.
You see a lot of people that stand out in their first years and it gets a bit too much and they sort of go missing for 2 or 3 years and Phoebes has gone the other way. And it doesn't surprise me, like getting to know her, touring with her at Australian level. She is hard on herself. You see that from time to time, but she's also like she's got it worked out, I think, in terms of her mental game, where she needs to go with that. And, you can just see how well-rounded of a person she is. She's got external interests and close with her family back home in Orange. But, I just think that she's so level-headed, which has helped her. Just her game's grown so much. And on top of that, now leadership, and she's done an incredible job in her first year at Thunder. The world's her oyster.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the first of our quick singles, bit of a snapshot on the Thunder and particularly Phoebe Litchfield. But our second one is Jess Jonathan and what she's done this season. I can't say that she's gone under the radar because we expect her to do pretty much what she's done this year. But at the same point, you've got to give credit to what she's done this year, Kirby.
Certainly. She's steady into the season, I would say, and to her own admission hadn't taken the wickets that she wanted to in the first half. 9 wickets from the last 4 games, 14 for the season. Importantly for her team, though, 3 player of the match performances as well and a couple of not outs in chases. And I think it's the middle order for the Brisbane Heat that have needed that stabilising, and she's really stepped into that role. She had some success we've been talking a lot about franchise competitions today as well, and she's had a lot of success overseas too, hopping around the 100, played for the Welsh Fire there and then went to the Caribbean Premier League too. So she's, I think, taking opportunities to play in competitions that when she's spending a lot of time on tours for Australia, she can't do, and has found a silver lining in that, I think, an opportunity in that. So, and I think when you're the captain of a team, there's this level of responsibility you feel to perform. And I think she didn't feel like she was initially, and she's found some wonderful rhythm at the right time. And that also then allows her to show up as her best self as a leader too. I think she almost feels that follow me because I'm performing type of leader that she is, so through her actions. So I think she will feel good about her game, which then translates to how she contributes both on and off field as a leader. So she's in a good spot heading into finals.
The final quick single is all about Chamari and what she's able to do at the moment as an overseas player. And I'd imagine, Sophie, whether it's Chamari or whether it's Hayley Matthews, this is the time where it's not that they have to stand up, but there's that expectation because they are the overseas players. How do you monitor that sort of pressure to make sure that they're not feeling it too much? And then also what you've seen from Chamari through the course of this tournament.
Yeah, Chamari's been incredible. More so with the ball this year. I think she's, when you plan to play the Thunder, you have to put a lot of time into Chamari with a bat. And, she hasn't necessarily got the big scores just yet, which is a bit scary to be fair. But yeah, what she's been able to contribute with the ball, and she plays with her heart on her sleeve and can really bring a team together and bring them up as well. I think that she's done that a little bit for the Thunder. But yeah, in terms of big games and big players and international players more so, I think, I don't know, I look at it from a Renegades point of view and we have got some incredible internationals but the way you sort of want to set up your team and set up your season is that you don't have to rely on those 2 or 3 girls. Sometimes you can and you'll get away with it, but it's not sustainable. And I think that's what, as I said before, that was our main emphasis this year, was to get some real quality in our domestic girls and Australian girls, give them some belief and confidence and clarity in their game, give them a role and let them do that, and then assist them with some quality. And I think you can see that with different players standing up at different points throughout the year. So hopefully that helps the internationals and takes the pressure off them, but they've got that experience in big games as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're able to do it. Because,
you can flip that. You're an international star in some of the competitions around the world as well. So you know what it's like to feel the pressure or the pressure of expectation. Have there been times where you've had to talk to your players as captain and say, hey, just be you. You don't have to be anything heroic. Just play your role. The rest takes care of itself. Or are they experienced enough now to handle that themselves? They don't need any guidance.
I think they are pretty switched on with that and experienced. And I think, even though she was an international, we had Alice Capsey out, who is only 21 years old. So that was really cool to see. And she's still learning, but she's an absolute gun. The way she hits the ball, she's got the world in front of her. And but yeah, I just think when you have personnel like Georgia Wareham, who's so low key, just extremely placid and level, that rubs off on people as well. And then you add into the mix the 2 girls from the West Indies that couldn't be more chill than anyone else I've ever met. But I think that sort of energy is pretty contagious.
All right, time for predictions. It's hard for Sophie to obviously give a prediction, but Kirby, from your point of view, as it stands at the moment, with 3 teams remaining, who do you think is going to be holding up the trophy on Sunday afternoon?
It's such a tough question. I think
remember that our guest has made the special effort to come in. We don't really want to be sort of disrespecting her, but I'll just leave that there.
I feel like I need to balance the panel, don't I? Because we know what So's going to say. We know where her emotion lies. I think the reason I think the Heat may raise the trophy on Sunday is because you have to lose those to win them. And they got beaten last year by the Strikers, and that was a game they should have won. They actually had that final pretty much iced and they found a way to lose it. So you see it in AFL a lot. The Brisbane Lions are a great example this year. You have to go to the well and maybe not get what you want from it before you can actually win them. The only thing that I have a question mark around is they've won 5 in a row heading into the final series, and sometimes there's a good time to lose and you don't want to leave that loss until the final. So in the interest of balancing our perspectives around the table today, maybe the Heat will win this year.
All right, so obviously a very biased response there from Kirby, but that's okay. Now, I'm not going to ask you for a prediction on who's going to win. I'm going to ask for a prediction on, considering the experience you've got in celebrating at the MCG in big events in the past, what are you going to do if you win on Sunday to sort of remember the day by? Because you did a pretty good effort at the MCG a couple of years ago.
I think we'll pack the kits up and go home. Have an early night by 7:30. I think that's
sure.
yeah.
I'm sure that'll happen.
No, I'm sure we'll take the time to celebrate the season in a very low-key way, like the Renegades do.
The only way they know.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, clearly haven't answered that one, honestly. But so, as I said, I'm not going to ask a prediction, but from playing at the MCG, now I know, as I understand it, you've pretty much been in camp at the MCG all week, training there, making it feel as familiar as possible. Do you feel that you can get an advantage being at the MCG, even though it is a venue you don't play a lot of games at?
Yeah, I think just being able to set up there for the week and call that home, that's going to be really helpful, I think. We grabbed the same change rooms as we were in the last game we were there when we played against the Stars. Just little things like that, I'm sure. It's really hard because we've never been in this situation before, so you sort of try and work out what's important and what's not and what to do and what not to do, or how fresh you want to keep the players, or how hard you have to train. There's all these little things that you just don't think of until you're in these situations. And I suppose we're not going to know if we get it right until Sunday afternoon, but at least there's been some consideration that's put into it and some thought, and we think that we've made the right decision, but you just never know.
So that experience you had back in 2020 in front of all those people, winning the World Cup, at the MCG, dancing with Katy Perry, all those sorts of things. How much of that can you use to help your teammates this time round? I understand it won't be the same crowd or the same environment necessarily, but playing in a big stadium in a big game, do you see you imparting some of those experiences you had previously onto the group as a bit of a theme?
Yeah, I think I sat down with Georgia Wareham after the last game against Thunder, and we sort of said that if we were to make this final, there was going to be a week build-up, and we just had to really emphasise that let's enjoy it. Let's not worry too much about the outcome on Sunday afternoon. It's more about what we have been able to do this season, like acknowledge that and just enjoy what's coming in the week. And we have been able to do that. We've had a nice little mix of a couple of days off, but we're starting to build up gradually into Sunday, and just little things like having our team meetings in the rooms at the MCG, just moments like that some of us might take for granted, but we got Karis Becker in there from WA. We picked up halfway through the year, and she's been incredible for us. You just sort of forget that these moments we probably all need to stop together and recognise and enjoy.
You got one last question for Sophie as a 2-time premiership captain?
Yeah, I do. I have one more. What do you hope for from Sunday, Soph?
I just hope that we don't go away from what we've been doing in terms of how we want to play the game, because we know it's going to be good enough to beat anyone. But I just think we've taken so much away from just being so focused on what we want to do, and that's being aggressive and that's being exciting, and it's also really enjoyable when you do it. So I think, outcome aside, it's more about if we can walk off the ground knowing that we haven't changed our style on the biggest day, then I think we'd be really happy.
I'm so excited for you.
No, it's terrific. It absolutely is terrific. So from some housekeeping, don't forget, as I said earlier, tickets for the final at the MCG are available at bigbash.com.au, and make sure you're following all the action of the WBBL finals in the Big Bash app for all the latest highlights, news, behind-the-scenes content. It is all there in the one spot, and it also means that you can, don't forget about this, is very important, about downloading the Big Bash app for not only the scores and the highlights, as I mentioned, but also that you get a chance to win with this the BKT Big Bash tipping competition, where there is $10,000 as an overall prize and $1,000 a week, and that'll go all through the BBL as well as the WBBL. Thank you so much for coming in. I know it's a busy week for you, but to have you in on Grand Final week as one of the best players that we've got here in the country, it's a real special treat for us, isn't it, Kirby?
Very spoiled.
We hope you go Look, I can't say because Kirby says that you're not going to win. So I was going to say we, but I hope you go very well on the weekend.
Don't suggest that I don't want a great contest, Whitey. You asked me for a prediction.
Yes,
that's all you asked me for.
And you were very honest.
The record to reflect
you
that.
were very honest with your appraisal of things. But in all seriousness, I hope it all goes well for you. You deserve it, I reckon, with all that you've gone through in your career. I hope it is on Sunday.
Thanks, Whitey. Thanks, Kerbs. Thanks for having me.
Sophie Molineux, our special guest on The Surge. Kirby, now what's going to happen on Monday? Are you going to stick around and we'll do a sort of a post-grand final wrap?
Be rude not to.
Of course. That's what we'll do on Monday on The Surge. So hopefully after a big weekend of cricket, you can join us then.